All right, welcome everyone. And then today is our, I think it's the sixth section on the history of Greco-Roman philosophy. And today we will focus on, I think last week we have a lot of people want to talk about the four causes. We haven't had a chance to talk about this. So we will continue on four causes and then some key Aristotle's concept. And then we will move on to read my method, fast read Aristotle's Politics, which has 8 books. Okay, so see whether or not we can finish these 8 books today. So next week, we are going to talk about the ethical, the Aristotle ethical. So basics, we have 3 sections talk about, we have 3 sections talk about Aristotle, the metaphysics, logic, okay, politics for today, and ethics for next week. So basically we can cover this one. And then we can move on to basically cover the key, the very fundamental for the Western tradition. So after that, we can move to pre-Socratic philosophy. So we will know where is Socrates or Plato's philosophy coming from. So basically, I plan to do 2 sections. One is Ionian school, which on the Asian Minor side, and Eleatic school, which on the Italian side. So I don't know we can finish in 2 sections or not, because they will be very different. Because these philosophers, they don't have, unlike Plato and Aristotle, they have a humongous writing, and they basically only have the fragment left. So don't have a lot of book, all of them just commentary. So I don't know how long we will take, but I plan to have a 2 week to talk about this. The philosophy, and we only cover 3, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And the rest of these are the pre-Socratic basics I think we can cover in 2 or 3 sections for all this, because they don't have a lot of writing. So the geographic area we cover on the Asian now, and 2 weeks from now, we will talk about on this area. That's the Ionian school. So the book we use today, we specifically focus on politics. But some of in physics and metaphysics, we haven't finished last week. We will start to continue from there. So that's before I start. Is any question, comment? Okay, before I started, you can raise your hand if you have. And the one thing I would like to say, I think last week someone text me the message. I just have to say, I don't see it's difficult for me to read the chat, okay, during the meetup. So
I'll read it, and I'll ask you the question. If you want to put it in the chat, I'll read it and ask Jason the question.
Yes, okay? Great. Thank you. Yeah, because sometimes you have someone want to have a private message to me. So I'm sorry. So I cannot respond, during the meetup. But you are welcome to send me the message from the meetup group. I will read it within 1 or 2 days. So Aristotle's life. Okay, I think we already go through this one. He is not Athenian. He is from Macedonia on the northern side, and when he was 18, he went to Athens, study with Plato. After Plato died, he went back to Macedonia and become the teacher of Alexander. And then later on, he set up his own school and then teach in Athens, the Lycean school. And then when Alexander died, they had the anti-Macedonian movement in Athens. So for this reason, he left And then the second year he died at the age of 62. And we talked about this last week. And then that's just his brief background. And the book we covered last week, we talked about logic, metaphysics, and physics. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to finish physics and metaphysics. But now I will finish the important part, and which also played an important role for today when we try to study Aristotle's politics. So, okay, if you have no question, let's give some basic difference between Aristotle and Plato. If you remember, in Plato's Apology, we talk about immortality of soul, right? When not Apology, I'm sorry, Phaedo, okay? When the last day of Socrates is talking about immortality of soul. And in Plato's Phaedrus, okay, he talked about soul as a tripartite soul, right? Like he used the fable or metaphor of the chariot with two horses, the spiritual horses and appetitive horses, okay? And the rational is control. So all human has three so-called tripartite soul, okay? So after you die, your soul just leave your body and immortality. Aristotle also have another book on the soul, and he also talk about soul. And I just make a quick comparison since that's not today's main subject. Basically, he talk about soul also three parts, but he's different idea than Plato. He talk about have a vegetative soul, which exists in the plant and every organism, right? Basics is reproduction. You have the nutrition and the growth. That's a vegetative soul. For the animal, they have the vegetative soul and the sensitive soul, because animal can move, have the sensation, have the feeling, right? So animal have vegetative soul and the sensitive soul. For the human, we have vegetative soul, sensitive soul, and the rational soul, because we can think, we can be reason, we have a reflection, we can think. So that's Plato's idea about the soul, which you can see is very different than what Plato is talking about. And I don't see, at least I didn't see it when I read Plato, Aristotle's on the soul. Look like he's not talking about immortality of soul. And he that's my sense, you know, like after you die, the soul just gone, you know, not very modern like today's thinking. So that's a key difference between these two different on the soul. Any question, comment about the soul before I move on to the four causes? I think most of people heard about four causes. So I don't know how familiar with everyone. So I just want to make it clear, so make sure everyone understand. And the causes. And before the presentation, we had a discussion about the difficulty of reading Plato. And well, I should not call easy, but Aristotle at least is much easier. I think one of the reasons, two reasons is, one, we talked about last week, we talked about category. He has a concept of category. He makes in category. So if you recall, in last week, we talked about he has 10 categories for the predication, right? So when you go to the reading, you will find out Aristotle would like talk about three kinds of government, four kinds of oligarchy government, 5 branches of government. He want to put everything in the category. That's the first thing, make our reading much easier, okay? Second thing is he start to focus on cause, the causes. And this category and the causes is not very clear in Plato's writing. And in Aristotle, he is talking about cause. And he made a category, right? When you talk about cause, he make 4 different kinds of causes. So first is material cause. Okay, that's I think in his physics. Okay, he talk about his example is a sculpture, right? Like this is a sculpture. So you can ask what's the cause of this sculpture. So you can talk about the cause is material cause. What is it made of? So made from marble, bronze. Okay, so that's the material cause. Number 2 is formal cause. How is it arranged? So basically, we talk about design, the shape. You talk about person, the body, or talk about a tall building, or a person stand up, a female, a male. So this kind of called the formal cause. Number 3, efficient cause. So what or who made it? So you need a sculpture to make it, right? You need a tool to make it. So in today's, when people ask cause, in the scientific world, usually people talk about this efficient cause. Okay. So that's number 3. Number 4 is final cause. So that's very famous for his tedium. And then you will see when he do his philosophy in politics, in ethical, tedium, teleology, what's the final cause is important because you also can explain what's the purpose of making this sculpture. You may want to sell for money. You want to display in your front yard. Okay, you want to attract tourists. Okay, or you want to promote some idea. Okay, so that's the final cause. So according to Aristotle, everything you can ask this for, and only this for, no more. Okay. So that's his fundamental thinking. So another way to look at it is easier is we can use as a table. We have a table, right? In this table, what's the material cause? The material cause is the wood. Okay, that's the material. What's the formal cause? That's the design. Okay, the blueprint. That's the formal cause. What's the efficient cause? Depend how you do it. You can have a carpenter to make it, or you can have handyman to do it, or you can have the factory and manufacture it, mass produce it. That's all called efficient cause. And the final cause, table, okay, you can do it for dining, okay, drinking, social event. Same as you can ask the same question for the person, right? Person's final cause is you can move, okay? You can serve for something, you can do something. And you have a formal cause, that's your body, your design. You can call it your DNA, okay? The design, the blueprint make you are who you are. And the material cause, your flesh, molecular, all these things, and you have efficient cause because you have to eat, you have to breathe, you have to drink, then you can grow, you have energy. So that's the Plato's idea. Not Plato, sorry, Aristotle's idea about causes, and which is very powerful, and even up to today. And personally, I still use this category when I think things. So I think it still works today, at least for my opinion. So I want to make sure, there's no question on 4 causes, and then since that's important, and then if I will say, if you only want to know one thing about Plato after the meetup, and people ask you about Plato, and then if you can say 4 causes, that'd be great enough. So anyway,
there is a question here.
Okay.
Is there any information on the type of stuff that Aristotle taught Alexander? That's the one. And it says, I heard this story. This is from Jeffrey Marr. I heard this story about him taking him to the river to do cold plunges every morning.
Oh, I'm not familiar with this story, but I know, I read from Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell said, he is surprised, Aristotle never mentioned Alexander on his writing. So I think that's a legitimate question, because if I have a student become something great, I probably will be proud and they keep talking about our relationship. So that's one thing. But I read the Alexander, when he is conquering the world, he constantly sent the plant specimen to Athens, to his teacher, because he knows his teacher, Aristotle, is a scientist. So that's the only thing I know. So great. Probably have a better answer.
Can I add
Please.
something? Well, first of all, he taught him like for only 4 years, and then he moved back to Athens and and opened the school. So Alexander was not very popular in Athens, because he was conquering the Greece. So it was not, and also I think he had an issue with Alexander because he sent I think Xanthippus, his nephew, with Alexander to record, and Alexander executed him. So they had he was also a philosopher. He was Aristotle's nephew, or great nephew, I think, maybe. So I'm not sure that he was proud of Alexander as a student necessarily. One thing that I read is that Aristotle had no knowledge about China, that he thought that the end of the world, the continent would finish with India, and that's kind of propelled Alexander's ambitions, because he thought that if he knew that there was a China, he probably could have figured it.
Thank you, Greg. And actually, Greg is if a historical question, I probably will have to Greg to answer for me, because I don't know much about Greg. And then thank you for the Alexander. Alexander has no knowledge about China, because Alexander has next week when we talk about Alexander's ethical. Okay, it's a lot of things similar to Chinese ancient teaching, Confucius teaching. And when I do it in the Asian philosophy, a lot of people ask, do they know Greek? And my answer is no. Okay, but that just coincidentally happened. Similar. But at least Greek proof. He has no knowledge about China. So we have Daniel and Patty. Daniel, please.
Hey, Jason, how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Hey, just one question. I can't remember in my studies if these 4 causes were interchangeable. And the reason was I remember some debate about whether they were valid or not because of, purpose. And for instance, this Zoom meeting, you had a purpose before you planned it out and then went from there. So I can't remember if Aristotle viewed them as interchangeable or were they in that specific order of 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I'm pretty sure Aristotle not talking about interchangeable. Okay, otherwise it would not be Aristotle. And then I don't remember he put this order. Okay, but probably this 1, 2, 3, 4 is the right order he put it. I have to double check. I never think about the order. Okay, but I know he is very so-called teleological thinking, because everything he's talking about, he is talking about the purpose. So this kind of thing, it has a strong influence in the Western Europe, because when you think about as a person, we have a purpose of serving God. The horse here has a purpose for man to ride. The pig has a purpose for man to eat. Then it kind of, hinder our human research on that. So that's the only thing I know. And the later when we in the next thing we were going to talk about the politics. then you probably will see how do he look at the ideal government will be totally different from Plato because he has something purpose in his mind. Yeah. Patty, please.
Yeah, I was just looking at this chart. Is that really his construct that the final cause of human beings is movement?
No, he didn't say that. That's
okay.
Now secondary. So he talked about sculpture. Okay, he talked about his book. He talked about sculpture. Okay,
Right.
so you have many ways. Okay, even it's not interchangeable, but you have many ways to look at. Right? You can look at let's say this human being. You can say human being is to serve God. Okay, that's in the Middle Age thinking about praise God, serve God. That's your end or final cause. Right? You can look at this way. So it's
okay. I wasn't sure if that was his theory or
no, only
example.
the sculpture is his example.
Right. Got it. Okay. Sorry.
All right, no problem. So I think this 4 is very powerful, at least for me. So I will pay attention on this one. And then, okay, so another thing before I go to politics, I'd like to talk about some key difference when we read Aristotle. I like to put these 3 things. One is teleology. That's I just answered, I think, Daniel's question. Because he always put the teleology on this, everything, ethical and politics, everything. And even talk about, he has a book called Rhetoric, okay? When we speak, what's the purpose? It's to convince people, okay? You want to persuade people, okay? Poetry also have a purpose. Number 2, eudaimonia. Let me see. Yeah, here. So eudaimonia, in general, we translate as happiness, but actually it's not really happiness. So basics, he talking about, we can separate on this table, okay? Hedonic well-being and eudaimonic well-being, right? Eudaimonic means achievement. If you finish the reading, Plato's Republic, you feel satisfied, okay? Even you suffer a lot of evening trying to read it, but you can consider as this kind of happiness, eudaimonia happiness. So Aristotle will consider everybody, every person will pursue eudaimonia in his own definition. So that's number 2 he's talking about. Golden mean is also important. He is not looking for the perfect extreme, okay? Especially in next week when we talk about the ethical, you will see. One typical example, he talked about courage. Courage, if it's not enough bravery, become cowardice, right? And if you too brave, you become overconfidence or rashness. So the right thing is courage as a virtue. You must be in the middle, or you want to call it the golden mean. Golden mean is not his word, but basically you want to stay in between, right? So same as your honor, right? So you don't want to show off. You want to have a proper attitude. If you show off too much, okay, then become vain. If you don't show off enough, try to hide, you become too humble. So that's Aristotle's idea on ethical. And the same concept you will see in his politics. Okay, so that's 3 things: teleology, eudaimonia, and the golden mean. Is the 3 important concepts run all over in Aristotle's philosophy. So that's what I like to mention. And so when we start to read Aristotle's politics, you will get you can pay attention on this trait. So before we move on to Aristotle's politics, and then you have a question or any comment before I move on? No? Okay. So I think we can start from book 1. Okay, so just recall what Plato doing in Republic. Republic had 10 books. Okay, Plato start with discussion. What is justice? Okay, that's how it started. Okay, people start to ask. Socrates start to ask, talk about justice. Then people have a question, and then lead to Republic, which is Kalipali, a beautiful city-state. Okay, that's a republic going. And the Pollock is different. It's very modern, contemporary, like today's. Okay, he started with his argument. That's his. I use Jewett, Benjamin Jewett's translation, and it starts with every state is a community, and some translation called society or partnership. Is a community of some kind, and every community is established with a view to some good. Okay, for mankind always act in order to obtain that which they think good. Okay, so he is talking about every person's action always toward to some good, right? And then the state, every state is the collection, okay, of all people. So for this reason, right, he talked about in all the political community, which is the highest of all, aimed at good in the greater degree than any other, and at the highest good. So he's talking about every person is pursuing good, okay? And then he also, the good means eudaimonia. How do you define good? That means eudaimonia, because everybody want to pursue sort of a happiness, eudaimonia. And then a city-state is the collection of all people. Even their good are different, but they must pursue highest good for the state. So that's his opening statement, and which is said totally different than Plato, because Aristotle will deal with justice in his ethics, okay, not in policy, politics. Okay, so that's the thing. And then he starts talking about the relationship. He talked about have 4 different kinds of relationship, and then it's a statesman to the citizen, master to slave, father to son, husband to wife. Okay, so that's different kinds of. He talked about they are different. Okay, he specifically talked about father and the son, and the statesman or government and the citizen. They are different. It's different kind. Not because one is large, one is small. So that's he tried to set up at the beginning, and which you may think about is not is a common sense, but for a lot of people like me from the Asian background, Confucius' teaching will be totally different. Confucius would believe father and the son relationship would be the same as the Lord and the subjects, because that's just an extension. But Aristotle said it's a different way. Okay, father and the son, master and the slave, husband and wife, that's all different, and also different from the statesman and the citizenship. So that's Aristotle want to deal with the first book. It's just open. And of course, the writing is much longer, and the writing is much longer, so I only can include the thing I think is important. So if you have something you have read and then I haven't mentioned, just raise your hand, or let me know something you think is important and I miss it. So because I cannot have no way to include all the writing in the presentation. So then we will move on to book 2. Okay, and book 2 he opened with this. Let me see. Okay, so he talking about the method. Book 2 is very rich. A lot of things you can read. Then you will see how different the approach between Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle do this. We must therefore accept not only this, but other constitutions, both such as actually exist in well-governed states and any theoretical forms which are held in esteem, that what is good and useful may be brought to light. Okay, so his approach is different, and which Plato is not doing this. Plato never look at other states. He just thinking, okay, what's the best way? And Aristotle, I heard he sent his student, to go to different city states to get the information and anything. So basically, he make a survey, okay, of the actually existing in the well-governed and some theoretical form. So he want to collect all the information. So some key concept here, okay, we will see the different, right, from Plato's thinking. First, he talked about eudaimonia, okay. Unlike Plato talked about idea and the form, okay, when he talked about state. Okay. And then he talked about politeia. And politeia, it's very hard to understand because during Aristotle's writing, I believe what he meant politeia is different from book 1 to book 6 or 7 because it seems like it's different. But in general, it means constitutional government means the arrangement of office in the parties, okay, and talk about the condition and the rights of the citizen. And I think he probably also means democracy, a good form of democracy. And sometimes he called polities. Okay, so in the later part or in my reading from the PhilosophyNow, the author talk about democracy. I believe when the author talk about democracy, he is talking about politeia. So this part is a little bit blurred, and not only I feel confused, I check with the secondary source. A lot of experts also see this part is not very clear because he seems criticize democracy and support politeia. But in the later part, he put a lot of effort on good democracy. So that's a little bit difficult part. And another difference is he recognized the private property and shared public education. Unlike Plato, in Plato's Republic, he's talking about shared property. And in Plato's laws, Plato talking a lot about equal lots for each citizen. That means everyone got the same size of lot. And another difference is Plato's Republic kind of reject the family. People live in the communal life, and Aristotle is talking about family. So family is important. It's the unit for the city-state, and the many units will combine and have a village, and the many village will become a state. So that's the difference.
First of all, I wanted to ask you, and then there is also some comment I'll read. My question: do you think that the Plato in Republic expressed a lot of ideas that we later on call communist ideas?
Communist idea.
Yeah, Plato in the Republic.
Well, I agree, and not only communist idea. I think it's more terrible would be the totalitarian, right? Or
right.
You call it the autocracy government. So, and that's a lot of people criticize. And then some people will say, no. When Plato talking about this, he's not talking about state, he's talking about soul, okay? So that's a lot. But personally, I would look at it this way. When Plato talking about a philosopher king, seems like he support autocracy. But we need to remember, in the background, the state, he's not talking about like Russian Empire, Persian Empire.
No.
He's talking about city-state. So he's talking, and he even have an ideal size of the state, which is 5,040 people. So for this small size of state, that's different than 1 billion people state. So
Yeah, but I thought that he's, for instance, talks about different classes and how one is serving another, and how and about the free love, about the that the children are shared, like things like like education of children. Everyone should be fathers and mothers to all children. I mean, things like that. I mean, that's kind of, I think, also. All right, let me just read. There are a couple of questions here, or a couple of comments. So I guess for you, someone asked, does politeia equal republic?
I think the answer is no, right?
Yes. By the way, when I read politics, I thought that a politeia kind of could be related to any form of government, that it's kind of like it's almost equal to the idea that politeia is a form of government, kind of a term. And you could say politeia about almost any form. That's what I thought.
Okay, we will talk about politeia, and I think in his book 6, he talked about the ideal state, ideal government. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Here is the Thales comment. I'll just read it to you because I guess everyone else could read it. And yet, in Aristotle's 4 relationships, he doesn't provide for citizen-to-citizen relationship.
No, I didn't see that.
I guess not.
Okay, so let me move on to the second part. Okay, so we just mentioned this one. Okay, I forget this one. So that's the reference from the Republic, right? That's Greek. You talk about the communist, right? So instead of talking about the citizen to government, he talked about the 3 classes. I mean, Plato. This one is Plato. Okay. The ruler, that's 3 there, right? So majority are producer, and then auxiliaries, which is protect the state, and the gold is the guardians, or one call it the philosopher kings, which on the top will do everything for them. So basics, that's Plato's idea, and then Aristotle will be different, and we will see how it's different, right? So on the second part of politics, and personally, I really interested on this part, and then and they show how thorough and how modern Aristotle as an empiric system, right? He looked at around the known world and try to understand how other people do it. So I kind of summarized a few things he mentioned. He mentioned Crete, which is an island on the south of Athens. He talked about their government is elitist government, and he thinks they will cause isolation. And he looked at the Carthage, which are in North Africa, because they has a typical oligarchy, and because it's a trading city, I think. So there's a lot of rich people. So basically, the rich people govern the state, and he thinks they will cause the greediness. And the Phidias, okay. So he kind of put the fortune of equal should be, he kind of insists the fortune of citizens should be equal, like communist thinking, okay. Then he talked about Hippodamus, okay, in the militias, okay. So this one, he is talking about the ideal state with 10,000 citizen state, and with 3 classes of people: artisans, husbandmen, soldiers, and the 3 kinds of land: sacred land for worship, religion, public land, and the private land. And they talk about three kinds of law: assault law, trespasses law, and the death. Okay, so this kind of crime basically talk about three kinds of crime. Okay, so he also survey on Athens law. In the ancient Athens, they have the Dracos, which has drafted the draconian law, which is very harsh. Then later on, Solon have overturned the draconian law and found the Athenian democracy. Then he said, some person said that the most perfect government should be composed of all blended together. So here he talked about Sparta, because during that time, probably Spartan has been considered the most powerful state. And the same as Plato's Republic, I can see a lot of Spartan's idea, prototype over there. So Spartan has monarchy. Okay, he combined monarchy. They have the two kings. I think they take one. There's a royal family. They have the two kings, and they have the oligarchy, and which is the assembly of senators. Okay, I think they have 50 people. And then they have the Every, which is like a citizen assembly. So Sparta has a system with combine all three kinds of government: monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. So some people said that's the best, and Aristotle is not thinking this way, and then we'll see how he look at. Okay.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah, please. I know you probably know a lot.
Ephors were more kind of a judges, not in a general assembly. They didn't have general assembly.
Oh, so that's a judge.
Judges, and they were enforcing the law, and they actually could enforce the law on the kings, because Ephors could actually arrest the kings.
So Ephors is from the people, right?
They're from the people there, but these are the judges. I think there were 12 of them, and they were the kings were kind of like a government. You know, Ephors were like a court in a way. So, I mean, they kind of interesting system.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for correction. Yeah, because at that time, the Sparta has been considered as probably most advanced government system. Yeah. Okay, so move to book 3. Okay, book 3 also has a lot. Okay, basics, book 3, Aristotle want to deal. He asks, I don't have a clear answer because his answer is very long, but basically you can see how he asks questions. So he asks, what is a city? Who grants the citizenship? Okay, the people, the law. I think he said he preferred the law. Okay, set the criteria for the citizenship. Who has the supreme power? Is the law, the king, or the people? Right? Who make decision? All right. And he talked about there are two kinds of kingly government. So, and then he asked a question. This question is, whether it is best to be governed by a good man or by good laws. Okay, so let's reflect what Plato talking about. In Plato's Republic, Plato seems talking about the good man is the solution because you need philosopher kings. But the Plato's last writing, Plato write the laws. He never mentioned philosopher king in the laws. So he later on, Plato probably changed the good laws is the best way to govern. Okay. So that's the thing he's discussed. And he also discussed the polity or politia, okay, versus democracy, and oligarchy versus democracy. Okay, so this one he will have a further discussion on that. But the most important in the book 3, and here you can see how Aristotle thinking. Okay, he tried to categorize everything, exhaust all the possibility, and then find the solution. That's his way to do it. So he think about in this way. Who is govern the state, right? You can have one people govern the state, or a few people govern the state, or many people govern the state. So when you have a government, is this government for, think about his teleology, what's the purpose? Is for the city is for everyone or for the ruler, right? So if you put this one, you can one, a few, many, and for the ruler or for the people. So you can have 3 times 2, you have a 6 possibility. So if the state is governed by one person and ruled by one and for all, then he calls it a monarchy, right? Kingly government. All right. But if you rule by one and for the ruler himself, then that's the tyranny, right? So that's the first situation. If you rule by a few people, you can have aristocracy, means rule by aristocrats and for everyone. Or you want to rule by the wealthy, okay, just a few people, and for the wealthy people, which is oligarchy. Or another situation, if many people or all people rule, you rule by many people and the state is for everyone, which is politia or polity. That's the ideal situation. And sometimes we call it the democracy, but it's a little bit vague. And here in book 3, at least he considered democracy or ruled by the poor and for the poor only. So that's his way of 6 government. And it's also good to compare with it's also good to compare with just 1 minute. It's also good to compare with Plato's. In the book 8, Plato talk about the democracy will decline to oligarchy, right? Because you ruled by wrong people. And oligarchy will decline to democracy, and the democracy end lead to tyranny. So in Plato's idea, only solution is have a utopian kind of state, party, and then rule by philosophy king. That's the Plato's idea. And Fred, you have hands up.
I think we tend to conflate aristocracy and oligarchy. My impression was that in Aristotle, the Aristeia, who are considered the aristocrats, are chosen by their higher virtue. And we often tend to think of the aristocracy as those who are rich, well-connected. And I think Aristotle had a different idea, that it's more like a representative democracy, not entirely, but somewhat like a representative democracy, at least in theory, where the most virtuous are elected to represent all the citizens in an aristocracy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree on this one, because aristocracy is not what we think aristocracy today. Okay, ruled by the royal relatives, but he means the virtuous people, and that's why democracy is used in the Plato's Republic. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Fred. Yeah. So, any other comment and or any question you want to talk about?
But
okay.
You're showing here, I think there is a dynamic that one form of government usually leads to another. That's the idea.
That's
that,
from Plato.
Right. That one form of government leads to another. and he kind of explains the tyranny leads to eventually to oligarchy, because one of the tyrant could be not a good person, not a good leader. Eventually the oligarchs would take over, and oligarchy would abuse their power and become more rich, and the diversion happens, and then there is a revolution, and the democracy comes to power, and then democracy leads to chaos, and then it's substituted by tyranny again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a cycle, because one king comes, or tyrant, and establish the order. So that's kind of the dynamic that he's talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Okay, so let's move to book 4. Okay, book 4 basically talk about also have a lot. Okay, book 4 talk about, you can see the how Aristotle approach or this one. So here he talk about 5 kinds of democracy. So that's why I start to feel the change of his meaning of democracy. Okay, so so he talk about 5 kinds of democracy. And the first, everyone is equal regardless of wealth. Okay, so kind of because most of people are poor, so that's what he meant. And the second kind is individuals must meet a minimal qualification to hold the public office. So, democracy means the people, okay, many people can rule. So, but for sure, everybody know you cannot have like everybody rule everybody. That's the problem. But you have many people rule. Everyone is qualified to rule. So here he talk about the qualification. So number 1, he talk about everyone has equal right to equal chance to become a ruler. And number 2, he talk about you have to meet some minimal qualification to hold the public office. Number 3, he talk about the law, okay, to use the law to rule, and only the noble can hold the public office. Number 4, he talk about the law is ruling, and anyone has a possibility to hold the public office. And number 5, he talked about the populist, the demagoguery. Okay, so basics, the public is sovereign, and everyone can do it. So that means everyone has to do it, and so you can see Aristotle's style. He will prefer number 3 or number 4. This kind of something in the middle. That's he want to do, and then he continue to talk about oligarchy and the 3 kinds of tyrannies, right? So oligarchy is ruled by the wealthy for the wealthy, right? So he talked about 4 kinds, okay, poverty qualification to hold office, or have a high poverty qualification to hold the public office, and then current officer can select the new officer. And hereditary, kind of become aristocracy, and today's definition of aristocracy. Or he talked about the dynasty, the traditional Eastern type of dynasty. Then he continued to talk about 3 kinds of tyranny, right? Barbarous tyranny, Greek tyranny, and the self-interested rule extended over unwilling subject. I always feel he's talking about Persian, or talking about Alexander here. So, but he didn't mention that. So that's he has 3 kinds of tyranny. Then he talked about the government. Okay, and this one I see is very modern. He called it the 3 elements of civic government, and it's quite similar to today's thinking. He talked about deliberative, which is the lawmaker, and deal with foreign affairs, executive branch, judicial branch, and basically his judicial branch is for punishment for the outlaws, and he talked about the judicial also appointing officer. So he talked about 3 elements of, my translation use elements, but some probably ways, 3 branches of civic government. Then he talked about 5 particulars. Okay, so that's the government department. Okay, so you have the public assembly, office of state, office of justice, military power, and the gymnastic exercise. Okay, so gymnastic, I think he meant because gymnastic is an important training for education, important part of education. So here he talked about education. And in the book 8, he specifically talked about education. So, okay. So that's his book 4, okay, to this point. So we have finished, already finished 50% of Plato's, not Plato, Aristotle's politics. So question, comment on this one? Okay. So let me move on. Book 5, okay. Book 5, he deals with 2 things, okay. Since he talked about the government, then there's 2 things is his concern. Fictional conflict. He tried to avoid the revolution or public or instability. Okay. And second part, he talked about how to preserve the government. So the stability is his concern. Okay, so that's his whole purpose of book 5. And the book 5 is long, and I just use a secondary source and copy the important idea on that. So book 5, he talked about the causes of fictional conflicts, the state of mind that lead someone to form a faction, and what can we gain, and not talk about people's greediness, and then the political dispute may lead to faction. That's the cause. Remember, he talked about cause. Okay, that's his idea. He will talk about cause for the fictional conflicts, which will lead to the revolution, or it may cause the revolution, or it will cause to the constitutional change. Then he talked about the constitutional change. So arrogant behavior, hubris, okay, of the ruler, okay, a lot of human issue, a faction realize how rebellion might profit, so that's attracted by the profit. People act to avoid disgrace or win greater honor of themselves. A ruling oligarchy or monarchy is too powerful. The power causes the problem, and the people feel punishment because the punishment is too hard, okay? And those who are not in power despise the poor government of those in power. Number 7, one class grows disproportionately larger than another. Okay, he talked about equality here. Corrupt election procedure is common even today. People who are not loyal to the Constitution rise in rank. Okay, and much minor change to the Constitution amount one substitute change. Okay, and the large number of immigrants. So he deal with a few things even valid today. And then he continued to talk about the preservation of government, right? You always be wary of lawlessness, especially in the petty form. Never try to deceive the mass. Treat everyone well, fairly, especially those who are outside the Constitution. Cultivate a state of emergency so that people will not attempt to revolt. Prevent infighting between nobles. Ensure that the property qualification for office remain proportional to the wealth to the city. Be careful not to confer great promotion or significant withdrawal of honor too suddenly. Be wary of class. Yeah. Prevent the public office from becoming source of profit. Avoid the corruption. Offer special consideration to the rich in a democracy and to the poor in an oligarchy. So since oligarchy is governed by the rich, so if you have to pay attention on the poor, and since democracy is governed by the poor, so you have to take care of the rich. That's very Aristotelian thinking. You have to balance, find the golden mean. That's his, philosophy typically. So the last of book 5, he talk about who can be the leader, right? Qualification that would be equivalent to Plato's philosopher king, who should be qualified as a ruler. So he's not really talking about qualification, like you can go through the training, some selection process to become the leader. He's talking about the personal ethos, right? The personal qualification, affection, ability, and the virtue. Okay, so these 3 things, I think it's pretty common today. It's still valid today. So that's the book 5, and book 6. Okay, so he talked about democracy. So here, I start to feel the change, because he is talking about, when he called democracy, I kind of feel like he's talking about politia. Okay, because he put all the effort here. So I think that's important to notice. At the beginning of book 6, Aristotle talked about first chapter 2 and chapter 3, talking about liberty and equality. Okay, so it's very modern. We will think about in democracy. So his liberty is a little bit different. He talked about liberty. It's not like you can do whatever you want, basics or free thinking, free speech. Liberty, he's talking about to govern and to be governed alternatively. So everybody have a chance to be in the government and or be governed. So that's what he talk about. Equality, he talk about measured by number, not by the words. Okay, so majority vote. That's his concept on the 2 principles in democracy. And he talk about the 4 kinds of democracy. Okay, this 4 kinds is different than the previous. He talked about 5 kinds. This 4 kinds talk about what kind of people in the state for the democracy system. So he lists the 4 kinds: husbandman, shepherd, and herdsman, merchants, trader, and servant. Every citizen without distinction, so all kinds of citizens who should be the body of the city. Okay, who should work in the public office, right? Only certain people. So Aristotle's conclusion is husbandman is the best, because they till in the field, and when they have time, okay, you can work in the office. Unlike the worst were the merchants, trader, because they are all crowded, live in a small area in the city, and they are busy all day, because the more time they spend, the more money they can make, and then they don't have time and interest in the public office. That's his comment. And then he talked about the executive department, right? So it's very interesting. He did this one. He talked about the department to regulating the market. That's today's economic concept. Okay. Then he talked about I am both public and private edifices, the building department for public and the private. You need the inspection to the land and the woods. You have the receiving public revenue. That's the treasury department. You have the protector and the notary, which is the person who represent the state, and the punitory, okay, the correction department. So that's book 6. Book 7, okay. Book 7, he starts to talk about ideal state, which is very different than Plato talk about the Calipoli, right? Both are ideal state, but you will see Aristotle's ideal state is more practical. Okay. So ideal states, he doesn't want to go to extreme. So what's the size of state? Okay, cannot be too small, should be self-sufficient, right? And cannot be too big, because all citizens is possible to know each other. So the land should be fertile land and with the coastlines, because trading is important in the Greek concept. Then the citizen, also consider the quality of citizen are important. And remember, during that time, when they talk about citizen, it's not include slaves. And the slave probably, if you do the main count, probably have, I don't know, Greg probably know better, probably 60%, 80% of the people. And then, so he talk about the good citizen. It's a nature, habit, good nature, good habit, good reason. And this part we will deal next week in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. And he talked about the shared task. Okay, this one also important. If you recall a few slides ago, in Plato's Republic, talk about 3 tiers of people, 3 classes of people, because if you are a farmer, you're always a farmer. If you are a soldier, you're always a soldier. And Aristotle is different. Everybody share the task, right? So basics, you need to produce food and craft. So every citizen and the slave will do this job. And then the young people, when you go to the young age, you will service in the arms, in the military. And then when you to the mid age, you have the chance to work in the government, okay? And when you're in the old age, then you will work on the worship, on the religious issues, okay? That's a very key difference between Aristotle and Plato. And the land, okay, 50% of land is for community and 50% is for individual. That's his ideal state. Then he has more to say about the ideal state. Then of course you should have ideal people, okay? And I put this one, since Aristotle is scientist, because before he do all philosophy, he write a lot in biology, which probably most of them are wrong. Okay, so I will call this all based on bad science. Okay, so basically he talked about people in conception should be in the winter based on his research that be produce smart, better, healthy baby. And he, according to Aristotle's bad science, okay, young animal produce female or produce small baby. So he recommend the men get married at 37 years old and the woman get married at 18 years old. So women have 17 years to produce offspring. And he talked about what kind of people. Okay, of course, that's also best science. So he talked about Greek people are ideal citizens. Okay, people from North European because they are cold weather, so they have full of spirit, but they lack of intelligence. So that's not good for citizens. And Asian is from the warm weather. They are intelligent, but they have no courage. So it's suitable for slavery. So this one is just best science, but that's in his book. Okay, so let's finish it today for book 8. Okay. Because with perfect timing. Okay. So book 8, if you recall, Plato's Republic, Plato is start from justice, talking about the allegory of cave, talking about the idea of form, talking about soul, talking about philosopher kings, talk about education, then end with myth of earth, talk about the soul, okay, how the reincarnation, all this one. That's Plato's, okay. Aristotle is different, but he also end with education. So Aristotle start with the purpose of the state, right? Eudaimonia, happy, good for people and for the state, and go to different kind of survey, different kind of government. Then he moved to democracy, different kind of democracy, how to prevent a revolution, how to preserve the constitution, and what is the ideal state, what is the ideal people, okay? Then he moved to education. Since he knows ideal state did include ideal people, and ideal people need education. So the book 8 he put in the education. And I find very interesting is Aristotle's politics. The last sentence he writes 3 boundaries of education: moderation, possibility, and decorum. I'm not sure how to explain this one, but I think it's very interesting. And some translation is different. Some translation call the mean, the possible, the becoming. Okay, so I don't know Greek, but I find out that's interesting. He ends with this sentence. And then key thing he talked about in book 8, he talked about public education. He think about education should be compulsory and should be made for the public because it's for the public good. And he discussed the content of education. Unlike Plato, Plato was totally against the music, poetry, this kind of thing. But Aristotle think, he think about 3 things we need to teach: what is useful, what's for moral goodness, which we will cover next week, and some pure knowledge for its own sake. That's the 3 areas Aristotle is talking about. Then the disciplines of study. He talk about reading and writing, physical training or gymnastic. That's the important part because you learn the coordinate, okay, find your physical body. Music also important because for your moral character, for your balance of your mental. And then he will add drawing also important. And I specifically check why he talk about drawing, because drawing is the way to learn how to correct yourself. That's Aristotle's idea. So you can see Aristotle talk about everything that have a purpose, teleological thinking. And then he talk about music, okay? So he realized education is not only just learn knowledge, useful, moral good, and the knowledge for itself, and also need amusement and the relaxation, leisure time. So he also considered leisure times important for the personal character. So he talked about use of music. Basically, he talked about leisure time. So he talked about music can use for the improve for moral character and the cultivation of mind. And he also include one of his scientific research. He said he doesn't recommend the kids learn flute. So if you have a kid learning flute, be careful. He said his research is when kids learn too much flute or have a problem to speak. Okay, so that's his research. So he doesn't recommend doing flute. And again, he talked about gymnastics, he talked about music and all this kind of thing. This one is for entertaining and relaxation and to improve your moral character. And he is against to become an expert on this area because the purpose is moral and the cultivation of your mind. So I think we will just finish a book of this Aristotle's Politics. So we have 5 minutes left, and then thank you everyone. And we still have 25 people here. I mean, we are great. So any question, comment before we close? Greg, you have any comment? Provide some history background?
Well, I could tell you a little bit about a little more about Aristotle and how he ended up teaching Alexander. So Aristotle grew up in the city called Stagira. It's in Halkitis, which is like area that was nowadays in what we call Macedonia. It's near there are like 3 fingers there in the northern part of Aegean. And his father was a court physician. He was actually curing. He was a court physician at the court of Macedonian king Amyntas. This is the grandfather of Alexander the Great. So his father, Philip II, grew up together with Aristotle at the court of his father Amyntas, and Aristotle's father was the court physician until maybe the age of 17, and then Aristotle went to Athens to study with Plato. So supposedly they knew each other, and that's one of the reasons that he kind of agreed to go and teach Alexander. I don't know if it must be no fun for Aristotle, to teach a teenager who is interested to be a warrior and wanted just to ride horses and fight with all these things. He also taught Ptolemies and a few other. So yeah, these are like a few details about these things. By the way, Aristotle demanded from Philip II for this teaching, he would restore the city of Stagira, because Philip was conquering this part of the territory where Aristotle was born, and he destroyed the city completely. He leveled it. So a part of the payment for his teaching Alexander was to restore the birth city of Aristotle. So these are just a few details about his life. So yeah, but that's very interesting theory. I often see that though Aristotle was very different in many ways, but the ideas about different forms of government, they exist both in Plato Republic and Aristotle Politics. Aristotle is kind of like more complicated. So in that respect, Aristotle kind of expand on it, but he's more, the politics is in terms of form of government is more extensive, but Plato also addressed other things about as you said, soul and justice, and somewhat different. So this is just my comments.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah. Fred, please.
Maybe this is a lead into next week's discussion as well, but Aristotle's politics seems to go hand in hand with his ethics.
Yes.
And I kind of wonder, as I look at his politics, to what extent it depends on the ethical behavior of the citizens by his definition of ethics.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what's your opinion on that?
Maybe we can talk about that next week.
Okay, we can talk. That's a good subject to discuss. Yeah, because it looks like Plato doesn't separate much, So Aristotle kind of separate, at least in my opinion, I think, So, but we probably have a different view on that. So if we have no more questions, then thank you, everyone. And the next week, we will talk about the last part of Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, which is also very famous. If you know Aristotle's logic, politics, ethics, and I think that will be enough. And then after that, we're done with Aristotle, then we move to pre-Socratic philosophy, and we'll start with Ionian. And then, so thank you, everyone, and then see you next week. Yeah.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank
Good
you.
night, all, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jason.
Bye.
Okay.